So today we are making crème brûlée. And this recipe is extra special to me because I had it for a friend's progressive dinner last Christmas. We started at one friend's house, had amazing appetizers that they whipped up. Then we came to my house and we had a feast of fondue. It was wild. I felt like I was in the French Alps. And then we walked to our third friend's house and they made crème brûlée. And what was so wonderful about it was that my friend knew that my tummy has a hard time with cream and butter. I can do cheese sometimes, but cream and butter not so much. And so he made me a special crème brûlée that was dairy-free, okay, and also refined sugar-free because he knew that was my preference, and it just makes you feel better. So he made it with coconut milk and some coconut sugar on top. I loved it. It was so special and I felt so great, and every bite was an absolute delight. So I decided to remake that recipe and also remake it with an almond base. So instead of coconut milk, you can also have it be an almond milk base or an almond creamer base. So I've actually used Joy, my almond milk concentrate that I love. All right, this is my favorite thing. We make homemade milk, homemade cream every week at our house with this, and it's just one ingredient, which is JOI, just one ingredient, Joy. And we just blend it in a blender with some water, maybe a pinch of salt, and maybe a date if I want to sweeten it up just a little bit. And then I have milk for the week. So in this case, I just blended up some creamer, almond milk creamer, and so I doubled the amount of almond base with water than what I usually do for milk. So it's really creamy, it's going to be high in fat content, and it's going to be perfect to mix with egg yolks and make a gorgeous crème brûlée that is dairy-free and full of flavor. So that's what we have here. Now you can use regular cream, you can use half and half. You can use a lot of consistencies of cream in crème brûlée, just as you can imagine. The more creamy the cream is, the creamier your crème brûlée is, the thicker it will be. All right, so use what you'd like. You can use coconut milk. If you use coconut milk, I would let your coconut milk sit straight up and down in the fridge for perhaps overnight, and it causes the milk and the cream to separate. And then I recommend you just use the cream, or at least a majority of the cream, and then save that water that separates out, save that for something else later on, or just, drink it, do whatever you'd like, add it to a soup. It's a lot of flavor, but the cream is the best part, and you may have to thin it out with just a little bit of that water, but that's where it's extra deluxe. So let's make this crème brûlée, shall we? We are going to start by preheating our oven to 325 degrees. So 325, so usually your oven starts at 350, so you're going down the scale. And this is because we're cooking with eggs. Anytime you're cooking with eggs, you want it low and slow. That's the same thing as on your stove. You're cooking a really nice omelet or scrambled eggs for breakfast, sunny side up, whatever it might be, low and slow is the ticket to success with eggs, to make sure it doesn't stick, to make sure it holds its form. And so that's what we want today, is we want these eggs to hold their form so that they make that really beautiful custard that we're looking for. Okay, so we've got our oven preheated. Next up, we are going to boil some water. This water is going to be put into our casserole dish later on, where we're going to put the ramekins that have the crème brûlée, and the ramekins are going to be filled with boiling water, really warm water, which is going to help the steaming process, and it'll make that crème brûlée the custard that we're looking for. So I have a pot of water right here, and it's filled pretty high. You want at least 2 quarts, okay? 1 quart is 4 cups. So we want at least like 8 cups of water. So a good amount of water. And I have it nice and full, and I'm just going to turn it on high and let it come to a boil. And that will be ready for later on when we're ready to rock. Okay, so next up, let's go ahead and do something special that you don't see in every crème brûlée, but I think this adds a whole nother element of deliciousness. So we are going to make a vanilla sugar. You don't have to do this. You can skip this part, especially if you don't have food processor or blender, or you just don't want to use it and clean it. You can skip it and you can just use plain sugar, because we're also going to be infusing the vanilla into the cream. But it's just, again, another layer of fun. So I'm going to take some coconut sugar and measure it out. I'm measuring in about 1 cup of coconut sugar, okay? So the recipe calls for about 1/2 cup of sugar, and then you also want sugar for the tops of the creme brulee that will then brown and make them crispy. So 3/4 cup to 1 cup is good, but if you end up having extra vanilla sugar, it's not a bad situation to have. You can use it in almost anything you make. And from here, once I have that coconut sugar in here, I'm going to add the seeds of a vanilla bean. This is one of my favorite ingredients of the world. They are expensive. So if you didn't get a vanilla bean and you just have vanilla extract, then you can just add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, okay? But I am going to be taking this vanilla bean. So I got this vanilla bean last year when I was in Tahiti, actually. They were selling it on the streets, and I think I got 5 or 6 vanilla beans for about $20, which I wouldn't say is cheap, but it was less expensive than perhaps something you would find in the States, and it's as fresh as it gets. And I've kept it nice and vacuum sealed, and once in a while I open it up and I pull out a new vanilla bean and I use it. And so vanilla beans are great because they have many layers of flavor. You have the pod on the outside, and then you have the seeds on the inside. And the pod is what typically makes vanilla extract. So they'll take a pod and they'll put it in some alcohol, all right? Maybe just some plain alcohol, or you could use vodka, which is pretty typical, and you let it sit and it infuses that liquor with the vanilla, and then that's what you use to cook. So we're going to use the seeds for this sugar, and I'm just going to take a spoon and slide my spoon along the inside of the vanilla, and it makes a really thick paste. So we're just gonna have to be careful and just plop it in there the best we can. Try not to let it get on the bottom of the food processor. And then I'm just gonna grab a little more out of here, really get a good amount of vanilla. It's gonna be deluxe. Okay. Oh, and now my fingers are gonna smell like that for the rest of the day. I love it. Everyone's gonna love me. They're gonna wanna smell me. All right. There we go. So vanilla bean into the coconut sugar. Perfect. Now I'm going to cover this and I'm gonna pulse it, perhaps about 10 times, just to try to get that vanilla bean incorporated into the sugar. And the food processor might make the sugar a little bit finer, which will be really good for the custard consistency. Okay, so pulsing this here. Beautiful. And what we want to look for is just make sure there are no clumps of that vanilla bean paste that came out of it, and that it looks very well mixed, okay? And maybe slightly lighter and fluffier. So I have a beautiful coconut sugar here. It smells like vanilla and a little bit of coconut, but not too much. All right, and so that's ready to go. And we're going to be using that later on. I'm going to take this sugar for now, and I'm gonna pour 1/2 cup of it into a mixing bowl and get that ready. So here we go. I'm just gonna take it, try to loosen it all up, and pour it out, and get about 1/2 cup. And then I'm going to take it and just add it to that mixing bowl. And then the other half you can keep in your food processor, or you can just put it in another bowl on the side to use later. So I'm just gonna put it right here in this Tupperware to get this big guy out of the way so that I don't have to keep my food processor out on the counter. All right. And there we go. And then let's just save this for later. Okay, so meanwhile, you want to keep an eye on your water back here. If it's boiling, you can just turn it down or turn it off, even better. And then right before we bake, we'll turn it back on and bring that water back to a boil. So we're just helping increase the temperature and get it ready, and then we can always do that again. All right, next up, let's make our custard, okay? So we are going to be doing two things here. We're going to be heating up some cream, the cream of your choice, with vanilla and a little bit of salt. And then we are going to be, meanwhile, mixing egg yolks and the sugar in a bowl. And then we're going to let our cream sit. After it's heated up, we're going to let it sit and come back to room temperature. And when that's done and these are well mixed, then we're going to combine them and we'll bake it. And that's how you make your custard, okay? So starting off, we're going to go over here and we're going to measure in 2 cups of cream of your choice. So here I have that almond milk cream that I made. I'm going to measure in 2 cups. 1, 2, perfect. Again, if you're using coconut milk, great. Just try to get a majority of cream from your cans. But if you only have enough to use all of it, just use all of it, all right? Again, it's just going to make your creme brulee a little bit lighter, okay? And not as dense. More cream means thicker, denser. All right, so let's go ahead and add some salt. And I'm gonna add about half a teaspoon of salt. So I'm just gonna shake it in here. I wanna make sure I've got flavor, okay? Salt is flavor. Salt enhances the vanilla flavor, everything about it. It's going to enhance it. And now we're going to turn this on a medium-high heat, okay? If you're using real milk or cream, okay, by real I mean from a cow, then you want to be careful not to heat it up too quickly. So I would suggest going to like a medium heat, because anytime you heat dairy too quickly, what happens is it splits, all right? And the whey and the fats and proteins split. Like if you've ever made ricotta, perhaps you took my ricotta class, then you know that it'll split pretty easily, especially when it has a little acidity in it, which we're not going to be adding, but that triggers it really fast. So anyway, we want to keep it medium-high heat, and we want to be stirring it often to encourage it not to burn on the bottom, because it's very fragile and very delicate. All right. So I'm just going to give it a little stir. Perfect. And then let it continue to heat up. And I'm going to go ahead and cover it. And then perhaps every minute or so, I'll uncover it and stir it. All right? Super simple. So that's going to happen. And this is going to be about a 15-minute process. Bringing it up to a nice light boil or a strong simmer. Turning it off. And then letting it come back to room temperature, okay? So you're gonna have to be a little bit patient with that. We can take this time, however, and make our eggs, okay? So, oh, I forgot the vanilla in the milk. We can also add vanilla. So I'm gonna take this pod that I just scraped the seeds out of, and I'm gonna toss it right in there into the milk. And actually, while we're heating up the milk, this encourages the infusion of vanilla into the milk. So this is really important. If you don't have a vanilla bean, use 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Okay, so just toss that in there. Let's give it another stir. And it's already getting a little bit of bubbles on the side. Okay, I have it on about a 6 out of 10 in heat-wise, okay? And I'm seeing some bubbles, so I don't want to leave it alone too long. So every 30 seconds or so, I can go ahead and stir it. And then I'm also going to be grabbing my eggs. And we just want the yolks, all right? So we're going to want to grab a different bowl so we can crack these egg whites and yolks separately and put the yolks in with the sugar. So I'm going to grab a bowl here. and put it down, and then go back to this cream, give it a stir. And the sides are starting to get a little bit of a boil. So I'm seeing a lot of action. This is a great sign. And it's coating the spoon, which means it's thickening up. And meanwhile, my water over here is boiling, so I'm just going to turn it off until I need it. Then come on over here, check it out. It's getting to be nice and thick. You know what, I'm not going to do these eggs quite yet. I'm just going to wait and make sure that I don't miss the moment when I want to turn it off here. So I have bubbles now bubbling all the way through, and I'm exactly where I want to be, so I'm going to turn it off. So once you see bubbles coming through from the outside to the inside, and you see them all the way to the interior, you can go ahead and turn it off. Give it a little bit of a stir, scrape those sides, make sure you get it all into there, and then we can just cover it up and let it rest. Let it sit and infuse that vanilla bean into the cream, all right? Now, back to the eggs. All right, we are going to be grabbing these. And now, because we want to be very careful about separating the yolk and the white, I'm going to be using 2 hands for this egg. Typically, I use 1 hand, and I'm a little bit more casual when I'm throwing my eggs in anything, but I want to make sure I get a really nice crack in the middle, and then I take my hands and carefully pull it apart, but I keep the yolk in the eggshell. So 1 big crack, all right, nice and strong, and then I'm just opening it up, and I'm passing the yolk back and forth. Now, if your yolk breaks, it's not going to be usable for this recipe. You have to keep it whole, okay? So you may have to use a different egg and then save this for something else. Now, we're going to have some really great egg white omelets here, all right? So save these egg whites, or if you don't get any yolk in them, you can blend them up with a little bit of sugar and make it into a meringue. And what happens with egg whites is if you whip it a lot until it's nice and thick and foamy, then you can just plop it onto a baking sheet with some parchment paper and bake it, and it's going to firm up into a meringue. So pretty fun. A lot of stuff you can do here. And hopefully your eggs are nice and fresh so that yolk stays whole. All right, and here I got a shell in here, and I'm just going to pull it out because I do want to be able to use these egg whites, not for this particular recipe, but like we were saying, something else. So I don't want them to go to waste. All right, next up, almost got this shell. There we go. Okay, we got it. Woo! That just shows you it happens to anyone. Everyone loses shells once in a while. All right, a lot of the time it's just the quality of the egg and how old it is. All right, there we go. Bringing the yolk over. Just continuing to do this. All right, and we're actually using 5 egg yolks. I messed that up. I think I said 6. We're just using 5. Okay, so hopefully I'm not too late there. If you use 6, it's fine. It'll just be a little bit fluffier, a little bit eggier. But ideally, you want to use 5. All right, got my 5th. And, you know, this can really also depend on the size of your eggs. So I'm using large eggs, which makes a big difference. All right, so if yours aren't large, then you're going to maybe want to use an extra one. And there's my 5 eggs. I'm going to go ahead and give my fingers a rinse. Now we can take these egg yolks, and the whites I'll just save for another time. And I'm going to whisk this well or use a hand blender and blend it. So I have a hand blender here. I'm going to use that. But if you don't have a hand blender, a whisk will work. And you want to get in there with some elbow grease. And we want to whip this until it's nice and it's a light pale yellow and it's fluffy. So here we go. I'm going to grab my hand blender. It's going to get a little loud here. and blend it up. So I'm gonna pause there. I hope that you have seen a change in color. So I know that it's brown because of the coconut sugar, but it really went from dark brown to a very light brown, and hopefully you can see that here. It looks like the top, the foam of creamed coffee, okay? It's really lightened up from where it was before, and that's what we're looking for, and it's gonna be this nice, light, drizzly. It looks almost like caramel, okay? The thickness of it, I'm just gonna give it a little bit more of a whip, but then it's good. And that's beautiful. That is right where I want it. Let's see if I can give you a little example here. It's very drizzly, all right? And I'm gonna come to the camera and give you an even better view, all right? So hopefully you can see it's very thick and slowly drizzles. And that's what we're looking for. Now we may have to revive it a little bit once this is done cooling down, because we really want to make sure our eggs are nice and cool, or our milk is nice and cool before we add it to the eggs, because if it's warm, then it'll start curdling the eggs too soon. All right, so again, eggs like to cook low and slow. So we're gonna add the cream, then we're going to be letting it come to temperature in the oven and start to turn into the custard, all right? So with that, we have everything that we've needed to do to this point. So now you can just take a moment to relax, perhaps pour yourself a glass of wine, read a few pages in your book, and let this come down to room temperature. And I know I'm already getting there, but I definitely still see some steam. So actually, to make this a little bit faster, we can uncover it. We didn't want to lose too much steam in the beginning, but now that it's cooling down a little bit, uncovering it will help cool it down a little faster. So with that, I will be back to you in about 5 or so minutes when it's a little bit cooler, and then we will combine them together and pour them into the oven, or put them into the oven, okay, in the ramekins. All right, see you in a jiffy. So as we let our cream cool down, mine's almost cooled down, we can actually get our strawberries ready. And what's fun is if you want to, you can add a few slices of strawberries to the bottom of your crème brûlée ramekin, so that when you dig into the crème brûlée, you have a little surprise at the bottom. So I just rinsed my strawberries, all right? I encourage you to do the same. And now you can slice these into thin slices, although I like them in chunks a little bit better in the bottom of my crème brûlée, and then also on top of my crème brûlée. So I'm gonna slice it and then just dice it. So I'm going one direction, the other direction, and then maybe just one slice, so that they're bite-sized diced pieces, okay? So I'm gonna do this with a few strawberries. 1, 2, and then slicing it off, and then slicing it off the top. And maybe I'll put 1 strawberry per ramekin. So this should make about 4 ramekins, depending on your size of your ramekin. So you can keep that in mind. All right. And also the size of the strawberry, of course, makes a difference. So just use your best judgment. And they smell really good. I love strawberry season. I'm so sad it's going to come to an end soon, because there's really nothing better than waking up in the morning and having a big bite of a fresh strawberry. Oh, it's one of my favorite things. All right, so I have a good pile here of some beautiful strawberries, and I'm going to put them into ramekins. And I'm going to measure out how I would like these ramekins to fit. So as I bake it, move this stuff over. So I have different size ramekins today that I'm going to be using. I have these bigger ones, and then I have these cute small red ones. All right, so this is just for me to do different sizes. They're going to cook slightly differently, so I'm going to put them in different casserole dishes here, but you want them to go into a dish like this so that you can fill it up halfway with water. It's that boiling water that we boiled. We're going to need that in the dish. So there we go, I have those set, and I can take some of these strawberries and just plop them on the bottom of the ramekin for that creme brulee. And they smell so good. All right, so strawberries, hopefully you're good to go. And you have your bottoms of your ramekins filled with nice, tasty strawberry bites. Again, this is optional. This is not as classic. It's a little bit more of a modern, fresh fruit twist to it. And those are gonna just cook really wonderfully in the custard. So I'm gonna toss these strawberry tops. And I'm going to check the cream here, see how it's doing, see if I see any steam. It's nice and thick. It's like that's just how I want it. What happens is when you boil it like that, it loses some of its water content, so it really thickens up nicely. And you'll see this is very thick. All right? So it's looking really good. It's gonna be delicious with the egg yolks. And just feeling it and tasting it. That is plenty cold. It doesn't hurt my tongue. It's like bath water for a baby, and that's where I want my temperature to be. So I'm gonna take this now, and I'm going to pull the vanilla bean out. All right, it's done its job. Vanilla beans can be used more than once. So if you wanted to rinse this vanilla bean off, you can use it in vodka and let it sit and let it infuse the vodka with vanilla, and then you will have vanilla extract, homemade. So use that vanilla bean as much as you can. They can be used 3 or 4 times in cooking before they're completely extracted of their flavor. They're very potent, very powerful. All right, so I'm going to slowly pour this cream in and stir it into the eggs. My pan's still hot here. There we go. All right, so stirring the egg mixture, slowly pouring in the cream and stirring. I don't want to stir too much. You want a little bit more of a fold so you don't pop all the air bubbles that you just created when you blended the eggs. But we do want to make sure that we're stirring enough that it's not cooking the eggs. And then I'm just going to take some of this milk from the bottom, as long as it's not burnt, and pour it in. It smells so good. This is heavenly. Whoever you're serving this to owes you big. They owe you a lot of love, because you're going to give them a lot of love with this recipe. All right, and there we go. So we have a nice light brown. This recipe will not be your typical creme brulee because it's going to have a brown hue to it because of that coconut sugar. But we're gonna have the beautiful strawberries on top. It's gonna look a little bit like a caramel creme brulee, and it will be absolutely delicious. So don't let that slight brown hue deter you from making this recipe. Okay. So now I've just made sure it's all mixed in. It's light and fluffy. It's still very liquid, all right, which is, it's gonna firm up when it cooks and then it goes into the fridge. But it's ready to go. Okay, so I can now take this and pour it into my ramekins. And just very carefully, try not to spill it, fill them up about 3/4 of the way. Make sure to cover all those strawberries. There we go. And there we go. So the way I did it here is I kind of have 2 adult sizes and then 2 child sizes. So depending on my mood, I might eat the small one or the big one, depending on what I have for dinner beforehand. Or even if I have dinner beforehand, maybe I'll just eat this. You have this with a little bit of a sweet wine. Ooh, that would be so tasty. All right, maybe like a sauterne, something along those lines, a French sweet wine. All right. And there we go. All right, so we have that all set. I got a few little drops in there, so I'm just going to wipe them out. Wipe out any extras that dropped into this container. I don't want it to be cooking outside of the ramekins, right? I just want it in the ramekins. Okay. Meanwhile, I'm going to turn back on my water, the fire over my water, so that I can get it nice and warm again and so that it's boiling. And then when we boil it, we'll pour it in here and then we put this into the oven and it's ready to bake. Okay, so just giving that a second to come back to a boil and perhaps cleaning up your space in the meantime. And so what's going to happen here is these are going to bake for about 30 to 40 minutes. You want to bake them just until the point where they look like they're set, okay? And by that it means it's somewhat turning firm, but the inside should still jiggle. All right, it should still have a little bit of movement to it. When that happens, so again, it's going to be between 30 and 40 minutes typically, depending on your oven. And then when that happens, you're going to pull it out, let it slowly cool down. And then once it's cooled down to room temperature, you're going to put it in your fridge. And you let it sit in your fridge for ideally at least 2 hours, if not overnight until the next day. All right. So I know that's a little disappointing, but that's why we're making this. Typically, you're going to make this early in the day. We're making it early in the day today, and so that it has time to sit in the fridge. So then tonight, you can shake some extra of that vanilla sugar on top and broil it to get it nice and crunchy on top. But you have to have the custard very cold for that process to work. All right, so that's what's going to happen. Now my water is boiling. Perfect. So I'm going to pull it off. And I'm going to carefully pour it into each casserole dish, but don't let it fall into the ramekins, okay? And you want to fill it up about halfway up the ramekins on the side. So there we go. Pouring it in just so it's about halfway up the sides of the ramekins. And then same thing here. This is going to cause a wonderful steam bath that's going to help form the custard. And then we're going to put these in the oven, 325 degrees. I'm going to put them on the middle rack so they cook as evenly as possible. And setting the timer for 30 minutes. And so from there, the last thing I can do here is, of course, clean up my space and then just slice up some strawberries, and I can save those for later, and those will be the last thing you do to garnish it, so you can cut them now or later. It's up to you. I'm actually going to wait. Now that I think about it, I'm going to wait till right before I serve it so that they're sliced as freshly as possible. So in 30 to 40 minutes, I will see you when I pull them out of the oven, and we're going to take a look and see what they look like so that we know what to do next. All right, see you soon. So my timer just went off for about 30 minutes, and then I let it sit for a couple more minutes because it didn't look quite ready yet. So we're at about 35 minutes right now. I'm going to take a look. And these little guys are very set, all right? There's no wiggling. I can feel it's quite firm in the middle. Perfect, okay? The next ones. Okay. So these are a little more jiggly. I'm going to take a look. But they're still firm on the top. You can feel a nice tight skin on top. and there's a little bit of a jiggle, a little bit of a shake. That's great. That's exactly where I want it. So I'm gonna call it good here, okay, at about 35 minutes. Turn off my oven. And then I'm going to let them sit and come to room temperature. And then once they're completely at room temperature, remove them from the water and then put them in the fridge and let them sit for a good 2 hours. So I'll see you in 2 hours, and we'll finish it up by broiling some sugar on top, some of that vanilla sugar, and adding some fresh strawberries. All right, see you soon. Okay, so I have these beautiful creme brulees. They've had time to sit, relax, and firm up, and they smell really good. Now I just need to put the sugar on top and put them under the broiler to caramelize the sugar and get it nice and hard and crunchy, and then it's ready to go. So first I'm going to turn on the broiler. If your rack in your oven isn't on the very top shelf, then go ahead and move a rack to the very top. We want these creme brulees to get as close to the fire as possible. So mine is moved. And now I'm gonna open my oven up just a little bit so it doesn't get too hot, but I'm turning on my broiler to high. All right, so broiler is ready to go. Now that I have the broiler going, we're gonna grab some of this sugar and stir it all up. This is the vanilla sugar that we made earlier. And I'm gonna take a spoon and just carefully shake a little layer of sugar all on top. And this might take some practice, but you just want a thin layer on top. And I'm gonna do this with each one. Make sure you have a cutting board down below them, because sometimes the sugar can spill over, and it's a lot easier to clean a cutting board than your whole countertop. All right. There we go. And now I have a thin layer of sugar on all of my creme brulees up to the edges. Gorgeous. And just like that, once my broiler seems nice and hot, which it gets hot pretty quickly because there's a strong fire coming from the top of the oven. So I can see it's getting nice and warm. I'm gonna go ahead and grab a baking sheet. And it's nice to have a baking sheet with rims, just in case they slide, it'll catch them. And so from here, we're gonna shake these off a little bit. Make sure they're nice and flat, nice and even. And then place them on this broiler. Place them on the baking sheet. This one I'm just gonna shake a little bit more. I'm gonna put them all towards the center so they're nice and focused and I can watch them all at the same time. And then I'm gonna slide this baking sheet in. And that fire is gonna be nice and close to them, just like a blowtorch. So if you have a blowtorch and you wanna go ahead and caramelize them with that fire, do it. It's so much fun. But this way is great. And what we're looking for is that sugar starts to melt and start to caramelize, and then it's gonna get like a dark, almost blackish hue in some of the places. We want it to get really dark so that it's nice and crunchy. And then we're gonna pull it out and let it sit for a minute and it'll harden. All right, so I'm gonna check on it. All right. And if you look closely, you can see some of the sugar there. It has little bubbles starting to form. And if it hasn't yet, just be patient. It's just gonna take a few minutes. What's fun about the broiler is that you don't have to keep your oven closed. You can really keep an eye on it because it's all about the fire touching the sugar. It's about it getting right up close. That's what matters the most, all right? Meanwhile, I'm gonna let that go for a little bit longer, and I'm gonna grab a strawberry or two. I'm gonna use probably 5, And I'm going to slice off the top of the strawberry. And then I love to do a little fan. So I'm going to carefully slice almost all the way through the strawberry with nice, long, thin slices without slicing the strawberry in half. All right. And then I have this beautiful strawberry fan that I can lay out. Let's see if I can show you here. All right, it's a nice little fan of all the strawberry slices, and that's going to be beautiful on top of the creme brulee. So grab a few more strawberries here. Meanwhile, take a look at the creme brulee. And it's right where I want it. Some of it is definitely getting that toasty black. I'm going to turn it so that it can cook evenly. And then I'm going to put it in for another 30 seconds or so. But you know what? These little guys are looking like they're really good. You don't want to touch it, but you can kind of see that it's soft and tender, and it's ready to go. So I'm just going to give them one more little shot under the broiler. And I really don't want to take my eyes off of them too long, so we'll finish the strawberries in a second. You can really see a little bit of smoke, a little bit of action happening. Again, we don't want it to be too long. It can be helpful to move them around a little bit. And there we go. I think it looks great. I'm going to turn it off, call it good, let them sit, let the sugar caramelize and harden up, and finish with these strawberries. So slicing through the top and then running my knife all the way through down to almost the edge. So I have a fan, and I'm going to do that 2 more times, slicing it off. And then this is going to be ready to serve right here, right now. So it's going to be so much fun to dive in and feel the firm crunch on top from that caramelized sugar, and then the custard underneath it. Okay, beautiful. I have those gorgeous fans. I'm going to toss the tops. And then I can grab these beautiful creme brulees. So much fun. I definitely got a lot of toast on some of this because I turned away for too long. So make sure to pay attention so that they don't burn. But a little bit of a dark browning, almost a burn, adds a lot of flavor. I actually just read an article about how if you can get a slight char on something, then the aromas from that smokiness that you get is a whole nother level of flavor and umami. And so it's always a question, is it okay to burn our food? And you know, it does turn carcinogenic, so it's not the best for you, but a slight char can add a lot of flavor and still not be bad for you. So there we go. I'm going to take these strawberries, fan them out on top. They're beautiful. And I'm so excited to hear how your creme brulees turn out. Make sure to share with me. Tag me on Instagram at anjalee.co. I can't wait to hear. But these babies are super cute. And I'm going to show you one of them here. Let's see, I'll show you that one. It's so pretty. And I can't wait to dive in. So there we go. Looks like a very caramely, dark caramel creme brulee with that gorgeous strawberry on top. It's nice and firm. You can really hear it tap, 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 tap. All right, so it's really firm on top. That's perfect. And then watch this. If I want to dive in, I'm going to take some strawberry, crunch. And then I get this beautiful custard on the inside. And you can see that custard there. It's gorgeous. And, well, I might as well have a bite, huh? Oh, perfection. So good. And there you have it. Enjoy your creme brulees and see you soon.